Hello, friends. This is Steve from Steve Talks Books. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Today I had a discussion with Booktuber EpicTalez and author Mike Shel, and we discussed the Iconoclasts series. So if you haven't read the series yet, this discussion is spoiler-filled, so beware before you continue to listen. It is a great trilogy, so if you have not read it yet, I highly suggest checking it out. And in this episode, Mike does read 2,000 words from his new book that he's working on, which was such a treat. So here we go into the discussion. Thanks again.
This review is going to be really special because I have the author of the Iconoclast series and Aching God, Sin Eater, Idols Fall, and I just have to say I absolutely loved it. This is going to be a gush review. Um, this
Well,
review is
I'll let you go ahead and do that.
and I'm doing this review with Steve Talks About Books and Stuff. If you haven't watched a couple of my videos, I've been shouting him out a lot. He's a really, really cool booktuber. Go to his channel, check it out. And I'm looking forward to this discussion like so much. I have so many questions for Mike. So first of all, how are you doing? How are you doing? It's been a while since I saw you. What are your 2022 goals? And
my 2022 goals are writing another novel. Things are going slow, but I've got a couple. I'm a couple chapters into the new book. So.
Oh, nice. So I want to ask you a question. I'm just gonna get right into it. So, do you how much outlining do you do when you're writing?
It's varied from book to book. Aching God, I had an outline for each chapter, and it was just bullet point. These things happen.
Okay.
Sin Eater, there was less outlining. There were more kind of broad strokes in the sections of the book, probably in quarters. And Idols Fall was a lot more seat of the pants than the other books were, and maybe that's why it took the longest to write. And it also is the longest of the three books. But then I was trying to tie off a lot of plot threads. And I did a lot less outlining for that, though. I mean, I had general ideas about what was happening during the course of the book, but I didn't know the direction that everything necessarily went. So some of it was just discovery writing.
And you know something, I really, in one of my book reviews, I was complaining about trilogies, like the last book in trilogies, because both the reader and the reader and the reader and the writer know that, okay, this is the last book, and if you've read the previous two books, you're aware of all the plot threads that need to be tied. So usually I have a problem with it because it becomes obvious, like the third book becomes so predictable, and it becomes obvious when writers are trying to tie the plot threads, because it's like, okay, these are the variables and this is going to end, so things start speeding up and everything. But when I was reading Idols Fall, I didn't have that problem at all. And it was why I asked you if you outline, because you seem to have a very, very nice balance. You know how people come up and say oh, the book was heavily plot based or heavily character based, but the balance the balance in that was really, really good, because it is very centered around the characters, but then everything is progressing in a very, very the pacing was beautiful. Mike, the pacing was absolutely beautiful.
We were talking before you got
yeah. And I was telling him before you came on that this has to be one of my favorite trilogies, just reading one of my favorite trilogies that I've read in a long time. I need some time because I'm still so hyped up. I don't want to say one of my favorite trilogies of all time because I have recency bias right now, a lot of recency bias. But
Hmm.
like about like maybe towards the ending of the year, I would make a proper like estimation of where I'd rank it. But this book is really really good.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, there's a lot, obviously this is my first uh trilogy, and this was the
Mm,
first closer I wrote for a trilogy, and I had a lot of anxiety about sticking the landing, and is the way that, the way the terminology that people use to describe finishing up a series well, because a lot of people are very critical of third books and
Yeah.
what
mm,
ends up happening, whether it's they don't meet expectations, or it seems like that someone that the author's lost the thread, or is not as interested in the characters, whatever the case may be. So I was really wanting this to end with a bang, and and to tie off most of the threads. There's obviously I left a lot out there, what we would think of as hooks for future stories and where things go down the line. But I thought that the major points were really answered. And so
mm.
I'm interested to
Yeah.
hear what you, before we got on, you said that you had more questions than answers with the end of the book. So I'm interested to hear what those questions might be.
Yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there. Like when I'm reading your book, so usually when I'm reading your book, my brain is not your book, books in general. When I'm reading, my brain is divided. I'm reading it as a reader, but I'm also reading it as a writer. So
Mhm.
like the more I can enjoy a book, like book that is very technical, for instance, and I'm learning stuff from like trying to see what the author is doing. That's me as a writer trying to break down um what the writer is doing so I can kind of like copy it. So I can enjoy a book as a writer, I can enjoy it as a reader. When I'm reading your book, I'm like the writer inside me is just like it's just like somewhere in some corner in my brain and I'm just reading the book and I'm enjoying it, So it is my questions are more from a writer's perspective because I couldn't divine your intentions, like your writing intentions when I was reading it. So I want to satisfy the writer part of myself so that I
Mhm.
I feel like it's more whole, you know.
Okay. I don't know how satisfactory my answers will be. I don't know that I'm as articulate about process as a lot of my peers are. The Slack group that I'm a member of, there's some writers in there who just have such eloquence and kind of talking about their process and how they conceptualize things. And I feel like a lot of what I do is I just sit down and start writing, and I'm not really putting as much. I'm
Thought.
don't have a degree in creative writing, you know,
Huh.
and I don't, it's been a long time since I was in an English class or any kind of writing class. So um, I think sometimes I have trouble articulating process.
Mhm.
So I'll answer as well as I can, but yeah.
Before I ask my next question, because trust me, if you let me talk, I'm just gonna keep going. But Steve, like, what were your general thoughts on the book?
As the series, as the trilogy as a whole, I loved it. And what's funny is that I usually don't like quest, like quest books. I usually don't get into it, and I started wondering why do I enjoy this series when I don't enjoy it any other time. And I think it's the there's like a lot of build up, and it keeps the quest interesting. It's not just we're going to go on a quest and that's your primary focus. When they're on the quest, it's a bigger picture throughout the
Yeah.
whole trilogy. So that kept me excited for the series. But I started wondering why do I enjoy this when I don't usually enjoy this type of storytelling. But I really loved it. I loved Aching God. It's one of my favorite fantasy books, and I love the series as a whole. So, and it's funny that you say uh, you're not as eloquent or you're not as the answers you give. And I every time we talk, I learn something new from you. Several things, and I'm not a writer, but I really enjoy all of your answers, and I've enjoyed talking to you about it. It's been such a joy to read the series with Epic and to talk to you about it after every book. It's been one of my favorite things that I've done here on YouTube.
Cool. Thank you. I'm really glad to hear that.
Yeah.
So, first of all, I'd like to say the leap from Sin Eater to Idol's Fall in terms of the improvement in your writing is humongous. Like it's you just like I feel like on Idol's Fall you went to another level. So I want to ask you about your editing process. Like when you're editing, something I enjoyed a lot was your prose. Your prose, like your prose did a lot to maintain that epic dark tone throughout the book, and it was very, very consistent. When you are editing your manuscript, like is it like do you are you adding more or are you adding less? Like how are you is when I say are you adding more, are you adding less, I mean, so some writers write their books and then they have to like make it efficient and everything, like reduce words, like, you know, avoid tautology and stuff
Mhm.
like that. But when you're writing, because your prose, like there are words that are intentionally put there, so do you like specifically when I say more, I mean, like, do you like add to your like add certain words and like try to like make with that intention to make it flourish? So are you adding or are you taking out?
I have this for Idle's Fall. I had a writer who I respect a great deal, uh, uh, kind of alpha read it for me and give me his feedback. Dorian Hart is the author of Heroes of Spira. I believe he's the fifth book is coming out soon. And and also Phil Tucker was another person who I spoke with quite a bit after he read the original manuscript. What I'll do first is go over and try to cut out some a few words that are bad habit words. I'll do that and clean the manuscript that way. Phrases
Okay.
that don't need to. The word suddenly, it's this crutch word for me that keeps popping up. It's everything's happening suddenly. So we needed to dig those out and um, just looking at cleaning up prose a little bit. But when Dorian gave it his read through, and Phil was actually the one who first said, what Dorian's suggestion is that we need these chapters that you've cut out, because I decided I wasn't going to write a couple of chapters, and it was it was basically what was going on in Harkany with Uncle Simon and on the frontier up there, and he said I want those chapters. And I'm thinking this book is already longer than the other two books, and what I was looking at having to add in was about 30,000 more words of a story. And I had thought, I'll do that. I'll do a short story of that, right? Or I'll do a little novella of that piece. And said, no, it belongs in here. So my end document was about 30,000 words longer than the original, when the first draft manuscript was, just because that chunk I had left out and kind of hand waved what happened for news coming back to Alanda in Bowden of what happened on the frontier. So I'm glad for that, because that was a blast to write that section. I think I had almost more fun writing that section than I did most of the rest of the book. But as a self-published author, I don't need to worry nearly as much about how long the book is going to be, right? Because I'm not looking at margins for print and printings, and I if someone wants to buy a print book, they buy a print book, and my chunk of that might not be as good, but I don't care. I'm trying to tell it. I'm more concerned about the story and telling the story I want. So yeah, this one ended up just getting a lot more in during the editing process than there was in the beginning, which I think is unusual for most people. But I think each of the books ended up being a little longer after I was done going through the editing process, which is, you figure, you should be cutting stuff out. Cut away the fat. But
And another reason to love self-public.
I know. There are so many advantages of being a self-published author that I feel like people don't often acknowledge. Like it's because when at the end of the book you look at it and you can feel like real ownership for it, and you're not like held back by margins, and like you're not the book ends up being your vision, which is I feel like very important when you are writing from your heart and you're putting yourself, like you decide because releasing your work is being vulnerable. You decide, okay, this is how vulnerable I want to be. And I feel like that's a good thing for you to have power over.
Yeah, it's interesting. I after Aching God had been out for some time, a traditional fantasy author contacted me and said, "Hey, I really like this. Would you like to talk to my agent to see if you want to try to sell this to a trad, get a trad deal from this?" And I said sure, and was going to speak with his agent and send his agent a copy of the book. And as soon as the agent found out that the audio rights had already been, I'd already contracted the audio rights for the series to Podium, he was no longer interested in talking to me. But what he said is, when you finish this series, come back to me and I'll talk with you when you start on your next series. For instance, I would have cut out all the stuff that happened on the ship. And when he said that, I thought, I really like what happened on the ship. Right?
Yeah. So do I.
So it's like, okay, the idea of having an agent, I've really been, I'm not someone who's so precious about his writing that every single word is one of my children, and it must be perfectly. I mean, I'm very open to feedback, and I've had other writers give me some feedback that I've taken and chopped stuff out and rewritten things. Tim Whitecastle gave me some feedback on the first book that made me go back through to punch up some of the PTSD angle on Auric. So it's not as though I'm not open to feedback, but sometimes I hear something like that, or like what I heard when I spoke with an editor at one of the big fives. And I thought, you know what, I think I like the independence more, and I might make a decision that makes this book less marketable, maybe. But it's going to be more my book, and it's my vision. And so it might have been that this particular agent, we wouldn't have been simpatico. It wouldn't have been a good match. And that happens too, so.
Steve, you have any questions?
No, I was just gonna say, since we're going full spoilers, right?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Yeah, another thing that I really love about it is that the deaths in book 2 that I did not see coming at all, and I love in fantasy when there's no, when you just go for it and you kill off characters that people get attached to, because I was attached to Auric, and when he's gone, and
I was too.
And I love when those things happen because you don't see it coming, and it's such a just like let's do it and let's make it happen. I love those chances, and as an author, it must be nerve-wracking a little bit, because do you worry about those responses from readers that I really love that character and you killed him off? And I'm not interested.
I think I think the in Sin Eater, the Auric's death at the end, I was real scared about doing that. Yeah. And how are people going to respond? Because a lot of people really responded to Auric as a non-traditional POV character, where here's an older guy, and wanting him to kind of see this through to the end. But the story arc that I had, he had to die. I mean, he needed it. It had to happen because this was ultimately Agnes's mission to complete, and he needed to atone for his sin. I mean, one of the things that in Sin Eater that I haven't had an opportunity to talk about a lot is the fact that there's kind of a therapy session in Sin Eater
Yeah. Yeah.
between Auric and the Sin Eater. It's a pretty brutal therapy session,
Yeah.
but where he kind of gets at your sin is despair. Your sin was despair and abandonment, and that's what you need to atone for that. And that's what Auric ends up doing is giving his daughter a chance to live her full life. So even though he leaves her obviously with a very onerous task that she has to complete. So yeah, killing and Auric, he's my first protagonist, that I've written like this, and in a lot of ways, it's kind of like in some ways it's kind of my idealized self, and just kind of the my image of the um, good guy who's just doing his best. He wants to be a good man. He wants to do good, and but he has his weaknesses, and I really came to really love his character. So it was hard for me to do that. But even thinking about who you kill off in the book, Bellic didn't die at the end of Aching God, the first draft. Sarah was the one who died.
Oh, wow.
And
That's very interesting.
yeah, and because I thought that Sarah had become kind of this surrogate daughter for him in Aching God, and we know that we don't know what's happened to Agnes back in Bowden during the course of the novel until the very end. So I thought that's going to have the most impact, is because Sarah is this kind of pure character. But then I realized, no, people really I think people are going to respond to Bellic more, and Bellic needs to die. So yeah, I worry about how people are going to respond to that. That they'll say, well, this felt contrived, or it feels, some people will complain it's, oh, you're just doing it for effect. And here I just said, well, Bellic needed to die because it was going to have more impact.
Oh,
So,
wow.
but yeah, it's a hard thing to do, to kill your darlings. So
It's very funny that someone would say, you're just killing him for effect. I remember, like, one time I wrote this scene in Cradle of Chaos one time, and like I killed off a character, and it was in a very brutal way, and I really really liked this character because at the time it was the one character that as far as I was concerned, was undeniably well developed, at least to the way I was looking at it at the time. And after doing that, I was depressed, like, and I couldn't continue writing for a while, like for 2 3 months I didn't touch the book anymore, and so it's like, yeah, these decisions are not made arbitrarily. It's not made, let me do it, this will effects. No, it is, it sometimes it's very emotional.
yeah,
So, like, speaking more on that, um I agree with you. Killing Auric was such a risky decision, and it was a decision that, like, yes, it had me a bit concerned after Sin Eater. But you did such a brilliant work with um, Agnes in the next book, um, and my question surrounding that was, so I actually observed that you actually do it quite often. You kill characters and then you introduce new characters that join the quest in the next book, and then some of them die off, and then in the so and what is very very impressive for me is how you you're able to develop these characters and make them so distinctive, and like they stand out, like on their own as characters. And it's like, I don't even, like what is your process like? Do you take inspiration from people that like, do you like, how do you how so you have side characters, right, or characters on the side that basically have these quirks that makes them very interesting. And it's just it like they just stand out so much. I want to know how what if you have a process. This is probably something that you do naturally, but do you have some kind of like formula into like making a character as colorful as you make them?
Remember what I do for a
What
living.
do you like?
Remember my day job, which is as a psychotherapist.
Hmm.
So one of the privileges of the kind of work that I do is I get to into a very intimate headspace with a lot of people and
Ah.
their internal experience, which can be very, very different, from mine. And so I think that's probably part of it. That
Hmm.
since a big part of my job is to get to a place to try to come to an understanding of someone else's experience, um, I think about people's motivations, right? I think about how their histories have affected who they are. So looking at a character like Naeus, who superficially comes off as this cocky uh, guy who's so sure of himself, when in fact there's an enormous amount of pain beneath that, and a sense of of needing to prove his worth. We find out, about that when, on the sea journey that someone would
Hmm.
have cut out if they had something to say about it. So a lot of it is, how do I make this person three-dimensional? You think about like a throwaway character like the guy that they bump into when they get to Calamander, who directs them um, to a tavern that we don't get to see because they get dragged off to the Duke Umberto's manse. Um, I had thoughts about what this guy did. He was a bureaucrat for the city for the duchy government, and kind of some background about him, but none of it came out. And I did, and sometimes that I'm planting a seed that's gonna bloom, because I think I mentioned in a previous get together we did that Alonda started off as a one-off. Uh, I didn't expect her to be in more than a chapter or two.
Hmm.
And then she ended up, she's a major POV character in the third book, and the queen. So so it's, I think, and I don't know if I said this earlier about, how in the past I always thought it was bullshit when authors talked about how the character, well, if they didn't want to do that and they ended up going this direction and I just had to pop, what a bunch of horseshit, people. That's just affectation. That's not. Sure enough, I've just seen characters do that. And so as I'm trying to build a three-dimensional world, I try to know a little bit more about these side characters, these small characters, and their backgrounds and where they come from. And it doesn't take long to kind of do a sketch to help make a scene feel more real, even though you might not visit all that information in the final text.
Hmm.
But just kind of having a window on people's inner experience, and being interested in people's motivations and the history and the baggage they carry. So that's how I do it.
Hmm. Nice, nice, nice. And speaking of Ilanda, I love what you did with her character. She became such a ruthless queen. She became so epic, so epic. Like her character, and she was one of the characters that was like right from book one. Like she lasted all through like um series, and I like how she became so prominent, and she just felt like an OG. At the end of like in Idol's Fall, she just felt like, yes, like this was someone that had a relationship with Auric when Auric hadn't even gotten Jada Sheila, so it was interesting seeing, and it just felt like she felt like um everything that happened to her, and everything that happened to her just felt like, okay, this is this it just felt right. It just felt right.
Yeah, I
She's
was
one of my
worried.
favorite characters in
I
the
was
third
I
book.
was worried about her part of Idol's Fall because I hadn't done much in terms of political intrigue and infighting and before, and I was worried that it would come across ham-fisted. I can feel like I can do dungeon crawls, I can do sword fights and whatnot, but I was worried about it because I love political intrigue and reading novels. Just I eat it up, and wanted that to work, and that's what was central to her part of the story. So
Steve, you have a question? I don't want
No,
to just be.
no. I'm just listening. Good.
Oh.
Just I enjoy hearing both of you kind of talk about writing because I'm not a writer.
uh, so like another thing is, how do you come up with these Zhao names?
with what?
Sometimes the Zhao names,
Hmm. Oh
like
yeah.
Garashar, like Zada Shela, like Timulus, like Ushul, Emilish, like Vesham, like they sound so epic. Like sometimes, like I can write like a couple chapters of a character and he has this name, but the more I hear it, the more I hate it because I just like put words together, like wrote them backwards and just like did some random stuff. So, like, how do you come up with these names?
I don't know. Just the idea of the Zhao language is I wanted it to feel alien, and but also in a way very kind of lyrical, and um, so I don't know, play around with combinations of sounds, and I don't know. I wish I could think of the moment that I came up with Zada Shayla, because that's probably my favorite.
Yeah,
It's a great one. Yeah, it's a good
so
one.
cool.
Yeah.
So
But it just, who knows? I don't know. I think I'm pretty good at names, so I think it's one of my superpowers. So I don't know how I do it, because that's the other thing. I'm trying to come up with an entire foreign language and being consistent. I'm not like Tolkien, detailed about that kind of thing. I'm not a linguist, but just playing around and wanting to have some consistency with it, and how the language works. And by the way, I'm interested to hear what you guys thought of the little time travel piece that happened in the book.
That
that
whole
was
scene, that was I did not see that. That was great. I love that, and I love the bloodletting scene in the tavern and everything. That was,
oh
and I think something that you do really well is you build that anticipation, and these scenes these heart wrenching scenes are drawn out, and not in a bad way, but you're reading and this isn't really going to happen. Something's going to come and someone's going to save Qulib and he's going to be okay. And no, but it's that build up that you start thinking, well, it's not, something's going to save him. Something's going to happen, and then it happens. It's like, shit.
yeah, like and some of the characters, that the way you kill them is just like, okay, I wasn't seeing that coming. And yeah, like you kind of like you see in this book, like I read it and I was having like trust issues throughout because Jada, when Jada Sheila, she planted that demon centipede in the queen's heart and everything. So I start questioning. I'm like, okay, like because even the queen, like I was, you see, I had the question in my head, and then well, Ilanda just like echoed it. She was just like, okay, like what would be the consequences if these gods are slayed? And what is Jada Sheila not telling them? Was everything a lie, or is this just incomplete truths? And then I start seeing moments where like this is the anticipation I believe Steve is talking about, like, and then like you start asking yourself like when for instance they were in that Zhao cave and they were like trying to get the obsidian eye from the wall and everything, and how it kills that priest that priestess that not she wasn't a priestess, she was
She's a swordswoman.
yeah, the swordswoman. And
Yeah.
just the night before, like Jada Sheila was complaining that like she seems like she could be trouble, You know, like I feel like Jada Sheila was like, you know, like it just like the build up into finally understanding what was going on. Like it was really, really interesting because you just constantly asking yourself questions, and of course, it's like you want to know, so you're just flipping the pages.
I'm curious to know what you thought about the big reveal near the end when they finally find Bellu.
Ooh.
That line that ends a chapter, the lines that end the chapter have been in my head for about 3 years.
Really?
Ooh, so you were just looking for the perfect place to put it.
Yeah, the phrase is "hello husband, hello wife" as
Oh
the
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That was crazy. That was like
Mhm.
it took me back. I was just like, okay, damn, like, you know, it kind of put a lot of things in perspective, you know, and yeah, that was a fun scene. What do you, Steve? What do you think about how the book ended?
I liked it because I like that. I'm hoping we'll get more in this world.
Yes,
There's
I
some,
am desperately
yeah.
hoping we get more in this world. Desperately hoping we get more in this world because it is I am definitely interested in like the extensions of the books you want to make,
Mhm.
you know, because it's I can the books are so much fun to read. The world building in itself is so dope, you know, and like the lore and everything is just really good. Because even in like Sin Eater, there were stuff that you spoke about, like when you were like in your exposition, that was I and the intention of that, you seem to be like trying to like set the tone of how you wanted the book to be. Like it wasn't like necessarily relevant, like for instance the stories that Usho used to tell the Gallo, you know, and like some of them were incomplete. Like he started the story and he didn't finish it, and then that just like let your imagination going like so just like little things like that, you know, that you did throughout the book. Like I'm so interested in the world, and like I definitely want to read more.
Mhm.
Like
Cool.
the one feeling I had after I read the book was that I need more of this.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna. I agree too. Is that I got the feeling like Mike's not done with this. There's so
You're
much.
not
There's
done
too many
with it.
stories to be told in
Yeah,
this book.
so many stories, so
So
many
many stories.
stories.
I'm the book I'm writing right now. I'm wondering, if people are really wanting to be back in this specific world, which is, the time and place in that world. The book I'm working on right now takes place about 200 years in the future,
Hmm.
Hmm.
and
So 200 years after the events of Ironfall, okay?
yes, and actually, I had thought I almost did this on Andrew when I met with Andrew and Leslie a little while back. Um, how would you guys feel about me reading about 2,000 words of the opening chapter of this?
Ooh,
How
I'd
can
love
we? How
it.
can we say no to that?
How can you say no to like
All
Yeah. How
right,
can you
I'm
say no?
not. There's a reason Simon Vance does the audiobooks for me, so cut me some slack. But the name of this chapter is West of Popdala.
Wow. How cool is this? This is awesome.
I reckoned it had been hanging there for at least 3 days, judging by the state it was in. The crows had made short work of the eyes and nibbled at lips and cheeks, but the clenched jaw told me that it still had a tongue, and that's all that mattered to me. I cut the rope tied round the tree with my hunting knife and let the body drop to the ground. It landed with an unceremonious wet sound. The broad leaves of the hanging tree had apparently sheltered flesh from sun so that it still held some juice despite the heat of late summer. I sat down beside it, legs crossed, and reached for my death bag. Rummaging around, I sought what I needed. First, my charm, the silver cruciform sword of St. Agnes, hung on a delicate chain. I put that round my neck. Second, the finger bone of a virgin. Well, finger bone of an alleged virgin. Such propositions being dicey in the best of times, which these weren't. Third, a vial of baby spittle, duly blessed. The spittle, that is. Baby can't itself have been baptized in the faith. Good luck finding one of them on the frontier, where folks are more likely than not deeply devout, if not outright fanatics. I kissed the charm and drew in a deep breath, preparing myself. This sort of work was never pleasant. The corpse's jaws I pried apart with my knife, eliciting a vile, creaking protest of leathery muscle. Then I shoved the finger bone past the tongue and as far down the throat as I could manage. Next, a whispered antikatsu incantation into a dusty ear, nicks and pieces torn from it over the past few days by hungry black beaks. I blew a breath into the mouth, suppressing my gorge as I came into contact with the flaking, desiccated lips of the corpse. A cold sickness in the pit of my stomach signaled that the spirit was creeping up from below and climbing back into the body. After a long moment, the corpse finally shuddered. It startled me, if I'm going to be honest with you, even though I knew it would happen. "I can't see," was the first thing the dead man said. "Crows have been at your eyes, friend," I answered. He sighed, chest rising and falling, trying to fill up dead lungs that had no living use for the air. He clucked his tongue and said, "Departed, then. Don't remember dying." "Someone was unhappy with you," I offered. "They hanged you from a tree." The corpse frowned and let out a long breath that stunk like an untended battlefield. "Hatches, then," he said. "Maybe Oliver and that new dolly of his, the one with the tits." "Where am I? Doge's?" "Long way from Doge's, at least 15 miles west of Popdala, in fact. No more than 4 days' ride east of the Red Wastes." "Huh, not bounty hunters, then," he mused, voice emotionless and thin. 500 on my head last time I checked. Bounty hunter wouldn't string up their payday and leave it swinging. Hey, bring me into that fat-ass sheriff in Popdala and we'll split the coin for the reward." He tried to laugh then, but it came out more like a barking cough. I had me a wry one. "Thanks for the offer, friend, but I'll respectfully decline." "Won't stoop to claiming a bounty?" he asked with a bitter sneer, like he was offended. "Not that. Headed west is all." Bellew wept. "What on earth for? Only dogs, diggers, and witches wander out that way, other than a few foolhardy sodbusters speaking in tongues and asking for the trouble they find." I watched the realization dawn on his dead features. "You're a dirt witch." It was spoken with certainty and scorn. "Been called worse," I said, and I took no offense at the slur. "I can't see you. You sound white. Stole then as a boy? By the Tachi? The Gels?" "No one stole me, friend, but I spent a fair spell with the Tachi. Had a shorter visit with the Doughcats. Gave me a lot of medicine, they did, and a lot of wisdom." "Wisdom? I'd spit if I could," said the corpse. "Woke up from the grave by a stinking Tachi dirt witch. What a turn of fate. What do you want with me anyway?" "Need to ask you a few questions, if it ain't too much trouble." "Oh, leave me be." "Leave you be? What else would you be doing out here?" "Eternal rest and all. What else? Why should I help you waking me up like this? What's in it for me?" The dead, still looking for an angle. "Well, I'll release you. Let you get back to that long nap of yours. Unless you'd rather wait here till someone else wanders along, another shaman, or maybe someone who might do you the courtesy of dicing you up into bits tiny enough so that your soul don't have nothing to cling to and cut you loose from the waking world." His scowl wasn't pretty. "You'd do that to me? Let me lie here in this rotten carcass stuck between worlds?" Maybe I would have. I was beginning to feel a bit ornery and plenty impatient. "Don't want to. Just need some answers is all." What could I know that you need? I don't even know who strung me up." The dead know things, friend. Sometimes they don't know what they know till you ask them. So I'm going to ask you some questions and see if you could have some knowledge that I require. The corpse's grimace was skeptical, but what he asked next surprised me. "Are they things I want to know I know?" An ace of a question, and one people don't ask themselves often enough. Do I really want to know these things? Am I better off in my ignorance? I told him a lie. Well, fair to say, I told him something I didn't know to be true for certain, something I just pulled from the air to put him at ease. You'll forget it all as soon as I release you and let you head on out past the final veil. He gave me a nod and said no more, ragged, empty eye sockets staring back at me. Taking that as affirmation, I gathered some of the orange tinged dirt from the ground in my left hand and let a few drops of the blessed baby spittle drip from the bottle. I mixed them together until I had a muddy paste and made the mark of the cruciform blade on the corpse's forehead, whispering the necessary words. I took St. Agnes from around my neck and pressed the metal onto the mark. And then I asked my first question. What did they call you? Tom Bench, Leda Hockett, by way of Champlain. Did a man pass by here, Tom? Pale, one-eyed fellow, wavy blonde hair, wearing a blue shirt, roses tooled on a leather belt. After a moment, the corpse spoke. Yeah. How long ago? Half a day, maybe a bit more. Armed, single pistol in a holster, the other an empty. An old cavalry sword, drawn and held casual in his right hand, dragging the point through the dirt as he walked. There was a demon riding him, Tom. What was its name? A pause. Then, Apterfuge. Apterfuge. I'd never heard the name. That gave me reason to hope. A lesser spirit of the pit, then? Oh, no, said the corpse of Tom Bench, a wicked rictus grin spreading across his chapped and nicked face. A soldier of the furnace, hungry and trailing fire. You can still smell the cinders on the wind if you snip real deep. My heart skipped a beat, and the sick knot in my stomach did a little jig. It was worse than I thought. So much worse.
That was epic. That was epic.
That
That
was
was
great.
epic.
Yeah.
That was epic. Like yeah, depending on how good the audio sounds, like I might just like animate that.
Oh,
Like I
cool.
don't have context to how
Yeah.
the characters look or but so it might not be like perfectly your vision, but like depending on how like the audio sounds when I listen to this like thing, I'll
Okay.
probably
That'd be
animate
cool.
that.
How cool is
But
That'd
that?
be cool.
yeah, I liked how you did the accents and stuff. We did the like there was a clear difference between your narration and
Characters.
the characters themselves.
Simon Van, still much better.
Of course.
But
Simon
as you
Vance.
see, it's something of a weird western,
Hmm.
Flintlock.
which
The pistol.
might be a disappointment to some, but I will be going back to in time to an earlier time too. So I'm not
Oh,
sure if this one is a trilogy or if I'm going to be able to tell this story in one or two books. So we'll see what happens.
I'm interested in seeing. I'm interested in seeing where that goes, and I like the references to like the initial book. I like the reference to Saint Agnes. Like like Bellu.
Yeah.
Talking about like things we know about. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's quite interesting. I want to see, um, because I feel like this would give a detail of maybe not a detail, but like kind of like a lore of what happened after like all of that. Because even Elanda was wondering, oh, what is going to happen like after all of this happens, but we didn't really get much of that after like the end of Idol's Fall. But but
Mhm.
I'm guessing from this we will be able to just get like a picture, or I don't know if it's going to be like how
Yeah.
accurate it would be, but to get like the idea, the general idea of what happened, what the
Yes.
history in the book like like says happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now I want to ask you another question as a writer, like if that's okay.
Sure.
See, so like it is very important. Like so one of the mistakes I made when I first started writing was that I the rebel I am, I like, even after reading a lot of books and intuitively being able to tell, like, I just knew what I liked and what I didn't like, and based on that I was writing my book. But somewhere at the back of my head, the rebel I am, I was like, I'm just gonna go and break as many rules as I can, and I'm just gonna like write something that, the ego of the artist, you know and when I wrote certain portions of it, I read it and it was absolute garbage, you know. And the the idea was but then later on I learned that even if you're going to break the rules, you have to know the rules first. You have to know the rules so that you, like, when you break them, you do it intentionally, and you can stand by it. You can be like, I know this is why that rule is in place, but I wanted something else because I'm trying to create a certain effect. So, um, what are some of the things that, like, some of the rules, or like just basically you have a lot of writer friends and like all of them have their ideas on how writing should be done. So, what were some of the rules that, I don't know, some of them told you or you were aware of, and you intentionally decided to go another way because it's because you wanted to write what you wanted to write?
Again, I don't think enough about my writing process to really comment intelligently on that. It just kind of happens. And I've some people who know what they're doing a lot better than I do will point out, "Hey, Mike, you're doing this here." I remember someone early on telling me, "Oh, dude, you never start a story with a dream. You never do that. That's a huge cliche." And um, and of course, that's how Aching God starts, is
Yeah.
a
Hmm.
nightmare, which very quickly before the paragraph's out. It's a nightmare. So it's not
Yeah.
like it does that the kind of switch at the end of a long passage that that was all just a dream. But there are things that I think, because I've been such a voracious reader, I've kind of, maybe some of this stuff I know it on an intuitive level.
Hmm.
But in terms of breaking rules, um, I think what I ended up doing a lot of times when people have pointed out rules that I've broken that might be affecting the quality of the story, I've listened. One of the things that I've had to work on for years, because coming from a clinical psychology background, if you've ever read journal articles for psychological studies, um, oh sweet Jesus, what a horrible thing to have to do. And there was a top 4 years of my life where I was reading 500 pages of that a week. For passive voice is just standard for that kind of technical writing. And so when I started writing for Paizo for the RPG stuff for Pathfinder, they really started cracking the whip on my passive voice, which happened a lot and still does. And so that's probably one of the things that a rule they talk about, staying away from passive voice, because just as people are less engaged with that. Um, it's something that I continually have to remind myself, here, okay, that's passive, because I don't naturally recognize that either. That's the other thing. A lot of this
Hmm.
stuff I do intuitively, and I don't have the level of sophistication. I think I'm not a writer's writer, you know, a writer's writer who can I think about some of the writers that I know who are friends, who are just, they really know that. Much more interesting interviews, incidentally. If you want to talk to Phil Tucker or AC Cobble or Tim Whitecastle or Evan Winter, um, all they're writers as far as I'm concerned, and really they can talk about prose in a way that I'm just not capable. I don't have the vocabulary, but I love
Uh,
to hear them talk about it, because it makes me think about my own process. But then when it gets down to it, I just sit down and do what I do and
just a
hope that
natural,
something.
eh?
Yeah. I'm going to call it natural or just happy accidents happening. So
Oh my God. Like Steve, how many times have we gushed at this guy's work, and then he just like pushes the lights to all every other person,
Mhm.
all his friends, shouting out everyone, like I see you. I really, really, really respect that, and I hope to be as humble and as modest as you, one day. I really do, I really, really do. So Steve, what was like a moment in the, because they have there are a lot of scenes in this Idols Fall, I think, was more action packed. Like
Mhm.
every POV, there was like intense stuff going on. Like what was like a moment where you were just like you just had like got your heart beating and you just got excited, really, really excited.
Well, toward the bloodletting scene
Oh, the
when
bloodletting scene, you
that
mentioned that.
was, yeah, that, and of course the climax was when the dagger kind of takes over, and I think Agnes says something like, "My arm isn't my own," and
Oh,
like I was an instrument. I, I forget the exact wording, but that was one of those moments. Was wow. So that had my heart beating pretty good. But there's so many great moments, and Epic is right, Mike, that you always name off. You're very humble and very supportive. So that's great.
yeah. Like for me, like so there were a lot of those scenes for me as well, and the reveal and everything at the end was crazy, very exciting. Like I was literally like, shaking reading it and everything. But for me, like, oddly enough, and this is just me, it was like the first chapter
Hmm.
when she was touched by fire. Like I didn't see that come. Like what a way, right? You've written A King God, and then you've written Sin Eater, and then you start the book like that. People lighting themselves on fire and just causing chaos. Like, oh, like, and it's like I was like the priest of Timulus, just like did like that just so I read Aching God Sinita, and then everyone like I didn't read Idols Fall for a while, so there was kind of like a long lapse. But that first chapter just got me right back into it. Like
Hmm.
immediately, I was like, "Oh shit! Oh shit! Oh shit!" And then, of course, like throughout the book, we see the consequences of that, like the girl that was touched by fire, which was very, very interesting as well.
yeah, I wrote that first chapter and didn't expect her to come back.
Hmm.
Oh, you
So
didn't
that
expect her to come back.
no,
Wow.
I thought that she was kind of introducing this is chaos and uh, world is going to start to fall apart. And then as I just kept my mind kept going back to her. Then of course
Hmm.
she ends up on the cover of the
Yeah.
book. That the that
Oh, of course, that's her on the cover.
mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice,
So
nice.
I will never disbelieve writers who talk about what happens in Discovery, because it is a very cool thing when characters seem to have a life of their own and come back even after you set them on fire.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
And
but
but
like so. Okay, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, as far as heart, get scenes that get your heart pumping, especially in Aching God, the nightmares were so great. It was almost like it turned into a horror book for during those scenes, and I hope you decide to write a horror book one day because you have a real talent for those scenes and just terrifying,
So
just
terrifying.
so terrifying,
So
so great.
terrifying. I
Yes.
like speaking about the first chapter, the first chapter of Aching God. Like when he's like, okay, he realizes is a dream, but then like he's still like in the dream. Like personally, that in itself, especially like the events that followed, was very, very scary for me because I have a fear of being stuck like in my nightmares.
Mm.
So because usually if I'm dreaming, it doesn't matter if it's a nightmare, I'm having a great dream. if I realize within the dream that I'm dreaming, I just become conscious. I either start lucid dreaming or I wake up, you know. But to be in a dream, realize it's a dream, and you can't like get up. Wow, like, and it's not just a dream; it's a nightmare. So that like the moment the book starting like that as well was really good. You have you One of the best things about your book is you set a very consistent tone of you set a very consistent tone, and it is you can feel it in the prose, you can feel it in the dialogue, you can, of course, the events and everything, the pacing as well, you can feel it. And in terms of pacing, for instance, like that was something that wasn't the best in Aching God, but then Sin Eater and then Idols Fall. Like in Idols Fall is such a good book. It's such a good book. And the way it just everything tied in together, because you see, I don't even know if, like, I have to reread this book, and I want to read it and analyze the hell out of it, like from scratch, because there are I want to try to you don't really talk about your writing process as detailed as I would like, but like I want to read it and try and devise what your intentions were when you were writing it, and like how you put things together, because when I was reading it, I was too engrossed in the story to analyze it. Like my analytic mind just shut off because I was just reading it completely right brained.
Cool. Good. Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the things that I have a lot of trouble now with is shutting off my writer brain when I'm reading. And it's something that I didn't have a problem with before I wrote the novels. And I think the prose does improve over the course of the 3 books. I mean, one thing we could call this trilogy is Mike learns to write novel. He learns to write a novel, we can call it series. And part of it is just getting a little more comfortable with just letting my process happen as it does. And, with the Aching God's first draft took 10 weeks. Sin Eater took 10 months. Idol's Fall took 18 months. So, hopefully this next one isn't going to take 24 months. Hopefully we'll get this done sooner, but I just kind of like trust the process, know it's going to happen when it's going to happen, and see where we go.
Well, no pressure, but we're looking forward to it.
Can you imagine?
No pressure.
Can you imagine? Oh my! I'm actually very excited for it. And do you know what you're going to call it yet?
Tentatively, if it's a series, if it ends up being a series, it'll be called Novo Mundi.
Novo Mundi.
If the first book is tentatively titled West of the World.
West of the World. That sounds really interesting. That sounds really, really interesting. Are you going to kill off your main character in this one as well? I'm just joking.
Not sure.
Don't
Honestly, not sure.
Of course, don't tell us. Like, of course, don't tell us. But did you, like, when you were writing Sin Eater and when you're writing Idols Fall, like, did you see anything in any of the previous books when you were writing that you kind of like regretted doing because you couldn't like go in like in another path than the book demanded that you went because of the decisions you made in previous books?
Not really, because I had a good sense of I knew where this series ended. I knew how this ended before I finished writing Aching God. I knew how Idols Fall generally ended. What the truth was about these gods and how this would all pan out. The thing that jumps out at me that it's embarrassing to say, there is a not a MacGuffin. There's an item, a magical coin that Auric gets from the Bishop of Timolis in Ironwound. That is like a little lie detector thing. And I never did another damn thing with it. It's not another reference to it in the entire series. And it's like I afterwards realized I'm rereading and like, oh shit. So that's the danger of creating these hooks, which you do when you're writing RPG material, so that people who read your stuff can adapt it to their own thing and continue it on in another direction if they want to. You just throw hooks all over the place, and that's part of what happens with my writing. So yeah, one thing is I wish I could take the damn coin out of there, because it ended up not being anything to do with the series. I totally forgot about it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, so like someone that reads it now would just think, oh, that was just something that you used at the time because it was convenient.
Mike forgot about that part of the story.
Maybe it'll make a comeback in the new books.
I guess
maybe if I had
make
that
a
agent,
comeback,
he would've-
exactly.
Yeah, or maybe if I had that agent, he would have rated that shit out, so I wouldn't have egg on my face. So.
Yeah, that's part of the fun. I just want to say thanks again to author Mike Shel and Booktuber EpicTalez. It's been such a joy to read the series with them and discuss each book after we read them. It's just been just a joy to do this and to hear about Mike's process, hear about EpicTalez and his reaction to each book. It's been a real joy. So thank you for coming to listen, and go check out the Iconoclasts series. I will leave all the information down below in the box to find EpicTalez or to find the Iconoclasts series on Amazon. It is available on Amazon on Kindle Unlimited. So if you do have a Kindle Unlimited subscription, you can read the book that way. All 3 books are available via Kindle Unlimited. Thanks again, and be sure to check out the YouTube channel and support me there. I appreciate all of you that come by and listen. I'm trying to get the podcast a little bit more traction, so I really do appreciate all of you who are listening and supporting the podcast. I can also be found on creepingdeath.org. It's the forum. We have my blogs there, so that's the best way to get in touch with me. Or, of course, you can reach me on Twitter at Steve Talks Books. I try to use Twitter less and less, but I can be found there occasionally. Thanks again for listening. I really appreciate all of you, and we will talk to you soon.